Hello and welcome to this edition of Young Turks Reloaded, India's longest running show on startups and entrepreneurship. I'm Shereen Bhan. It is my great pleasure to welcome back on the program a man who started off at IIT Delhi, made his way to ISB and then to the Valley. He was also instrumental in stitching together that massive $22 billion deal between WhatsApp and Facebook, decided to launch his fund in 2014, and today Venture Highways has merged with General Catalyst. Neeraj, it's a pleasure to have you back on Young Turks. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks, Shereen. It's always a pleasure talking to you, and thank you so much for supporting the Indian startup ecosystem for such a long time.
No, and thank you for what you do, but let's start with this big development that's taken place. Started Venture Highways in 2014, now the decision to go with General Catalyst. Why?
I think Venture Highway and General Catalyst is such a dream combination, and we really want to take the Indian startup ecosystem to the next level. So I could not have missed on this opportunity to work together with General Catalyst to really back the boldest entrepreneurs that are building for India and for the world.
You know, talking about this dream combination, as you called it, with a focus now on India, or a renewed, more aggressive perhaps focus on India, why do you believe that this is India's startup ecosystem moment?
I think India was always a focus for us, but with what we're doing with GC now, it is taken to another level. And I think it plays beautifully in the moment that India is going through, right? If you look at the Indian startup ecosystem, it's been around for the last 2 decades or so, right? And a lot of good things have come out of it, right? But if you look at what has happened in the last few years, maybe 2 to 3 years, a lot of these companies have actually gone and listed in India, right? And for us, everyone outside India that's watching India carefully, that's a huge moment, right? That means that there's a huge inflection happening where you are building world-class companies for India and for the globe, but now you have an outcome to take these companies to billions of dollars of market cap, doing really, really good work.
And the exit becomes real.
And that's what, end of the day, venture capital funds care about, right? They back these companies at the earliest stages, and they really dream for like a huge outcome, and that is now possible in India, right? So that's amazing.
You know, let's talk about investing in India, and I'll start by talking to you about the big investment that GC has made in Zepto. Now, you know Zepto, you've been an early investor in Zepto, and I was talking to Adit a couple of weeks ago, and this has been the big surprise coming out of India, right? People wrote off quick commerce before quick commerce became a thing, and today the story has turned completely. Before I talk specifically about Zepto, what has the quick commerce story told you about India, and is there a particular unique insight that this offers?
I think India will have its own way of building companies, right? So we have to get away from the global biases and look at India as its own ecosystem. And that is what this story tells us as well, right? Quick commerce has not really worked in any other part of the world, except India really took it and just took it to another level, right? So that means that when you are investing in India, you have to be really, really aware of what the customer needs are in India, what the conditions are, and what the local entrepreneurs are doing.
You yourself weren't that much of a believer, even though you were invested in it.
Absolutely, and I think that's something which all of us go through, right? Because we are in the business of pattern matching, right? We look at companies in the US and Europe and say, okay, this hasn't worked, why should it work in India, right? That's like human nature. Right? But we have to really fight against it and look at what the conditions are in India. How do the customers behave in India, right? Why does a quick commerce grocery company will scale in India when it will not in any other part of the world? And that is where I think Zepto has proved everybody wrong, including me. And I'm delighted to be a backer of Zepto from day one, as well as now getting involved with GC in a big way. So can't be more delighted by how things are going with Zepto.
Speaking of, one of the stories that has proven everybody wrong, which is the quick commerce story, but your point about, what works in India may not necessarily work in the rest of the world, and what works in the rest of the world may not necessarily work in India. In that context, let's talk about the attempt of doing India's Twitter, India's Facebook, India's Reels, and so on and so forth. And we've seen most of those companies folding up. Case in point, more recently, you're an investor in ShareChat as well. Do you believe that, at least in this space, in this sort of social, space, that the big boys are just too big and ubiquitous for the opportunity for startups to make any kind of inroads?
So I wouldn't rule Indian startups to not be able to compete with the global juggernauts. I think the issue in this sector is that it's all about network effects, right? And if you have friends outside of India and you want to follow people outside of India, you have to go, have presence on these networks, right? But having said that, I'm still very hopeful that there will be Indian use cases that will really enable Indian entrepreneurs to go after those,
More
use cases.
regional language, perhaps?
ShareChat is one example of it. I would not rule them out yet. I think there's a renewed focus on...
They're going through pain, though.
Anything that is dependent on online ads as the business model will take time to scale. Like it's a market that is still emerging in India, right? It's dominated by Facebooks and Googles of the world, right? So to make a real dent in that market, their business model has to evolve. And that is where I think it'll take time. And I'm hopeful that a few more companies like ShareChat will emerge and take some of the big companies on. And I really wish that happens in India.
Well, speaking about social, and you've made your view very clear on what's happened for WhatsApp post the acquisition by Facebook, and that actually prompted you to turn entrepreneur, and you decided to launch Halo, but you also decided to then give it up. Why did you?
I think there's one thing very clear about consumer social companies, right? So you have to delight the user in the end. Right? You have to build something that is really useful for them. And if that doesn't happen, at scale, you cannot build a company around it, right? Even at Hello App, I think we had a lot of users that liked what we were doing. But did we get like tens of millions of users coming back every day? That did not happen. And that tells me something, that maybe what we were building it's not the right timing, or maybe the user doesn't need it anymore. When we started building it, privacy was at its peak, and everybody wanted to have a more private setup when it comes to online communities, right? And over time, that whole need kind of like went sideways, and so did a lot of companies that were building in that with
Why?
that need.
Because people don't care about privacy as much as they did, or there's an acceptance of the fact that, look, as they say in India, Google knows everything in any case. So how does it matter?
No, I think credit where it's due. A lot of these companies actually showed up their privacy, offerings as well. Right? If you look at Meta and Google and Twitter and everybody else, I think they understood that if they want to retain their users, they will have to make sure that their privacy is at par with what the user needs. I think it was not there a few years back, but I think they made a lot of progress there as well. So I wouldn't just say that the user will accept whatever you give them.
Yeah.
Bigger companies
also... So you believe that because of the user pushback, changes have been forced?
Absolutely.
Let's talk about what everybody's talking about, AI and Gen AI. I mean, it's hard to... I was driving from the valley to the city, and literally every billboard on either side had something to do with AI. Some company pitching some sort of AI product or some sort of AI service. Where are we in the hype cycle today? Are you a big believer in what's going on this front?
I think we are a big believer in AI and what is happening in the world today. AI is going to change everything. From every sector to every country, there will be applications that will completely change how we do things today, right? And if you really back up from there, what that means is you have to go industry by industry and look at what AI does to that industry, right? Especially talking about India, it's going to completely leapfrog some of the things that US and Europe have been doing in technology side of these industries for a long time. Take healthcare, defense, manufacturing, right? India has not been touched by technology too much in these sectors. And I think what AI has shown and what it can do, I think will completely leapfrog, I think, rest of the world, and will be able to build real applications for billions of people in India in these industries.
What gives you that confidence about why India, you believe, will be at an advantage and B, possibly even lead?
Because I think there's an immense talent in India, right? People are really, really tech savvy now. I mean, as you've seen how the startup ecosystem has grown. So there's abundant supply of really talented people who want to build in AI. That's one. And two, I think there's not a lot of legacy in these industries in technology, right? So if you really look at manufacturing and defense, technology has not really touched a lot of these industries, right? So there's a fresh perspective and an open blank slate to play with. And that is where I think India, will leapfrog.
So is AI going to be a large part of the sort of strategic investing that you intend to do, not just in India, but for GC globally as well?
Absolutely. I think there are two things happening across GC all over the world, and India also as well. We are investing in a lot of foundational models, right? We have a big investment in Mistral out of Europe, right? So that's one theme that we are really backing. Venture Highway actually invested in Sarvam as well, which is an India-based company, which is building, doing real work towards making it work for the local languages and audio-based, interactions, right? Plus, I think the second theme is, if you look at what General Catalyst has done with companies like Anduril in defense and Helsing in Europe, right? These are two defense companies which are doing cutting-edge work in AI in defense, right? We want to bring some of that innovation to India as well, right? So there's real focus in looking at how AI will transform industries globally, and we want to do that in India as well, obviously with what applies to India, right? So that's a big focus.
So how do you bring in this innovation that you just spoke of to India? Merely by investing in startups in India in those spaces, or what else do you intend to do?
We have to find the best entrepreneurs who are doing the most interesting work in these industries in India, and we have to back them. And then we have to see if there are companies in our portfolio in other parts of the world that we can take that innovation and learn from those companies and bring some of those things to India. And then once India leads in some of these things, then bring that innovation back to other parts of the world. So it's actually a very synergistic sort of ecosystem that we are building across GC. We have an amazing team in the US. We have a great team in Europe, and now we have a team in India as well, right? So we can really work together collaboratively to build companies that not only serve that region, but also bring some of that innovation to other parts of the world.
So specifically from an India standpoint, which beyond AI and defense, the two themes that you just spoke of, what else is looking interesting? What's on the anvil at this point in time in terms of possible deals that you're looking at?
So I think healthcare is super interesting. I think for us, GC has been investing in healthcare for a very long time, right? And India, as you know, has not been touched by technology. Healthcare has not been touched by technology in a really big way, right? So we want to bring a lot of that innovation and that thinking to India, right? That's number one. We are a big believer in global resilience, and that's a big theme for us in investing globally, and that we want to do that in India as well. Fintech is another, huge, sector for us globally as well. So India will benefit from all the investments we have done globally in fintech. And last is a lot of global resilience sectors like manufacturing, defense that we talked about earlier. We are actively looking at right now to see what are some of the best companies getting built at the earliest stages. And one thing about GC that a lot of people don't understand is that we are actually an early stage investing company, even though we invest across sectors. But our DNA is actually still early stage. Right? So we want to find the best entrepreneurs at the earliest stages of their life cycle and go back them.
You talked about fintech, so let's build a little bit on that. I mean, you've known Paytm for very long.
Absolutely.
You are on the board.
I was on the board. Yes.
Actually, you were on the board, off the board, came back just before the IPO. It's been a great story in the fintech space, now going through its own set of challenges and pain because of regulatory challenges. How do you see the Paytm story unfolding from here?
So I think Paytm is a great story for the Indian ecosystem, right? Before Paytm happened, what was the state of digital payments in India? There was not much happening. I think they really changed the game, and it goes back probably a decade, right? And they've been at it for a very long time, right? And there was a lot of customer love and delight that was built along the way, right? But as you know, I think none of the startup stories are linear. There's a lot of ebbs and flows as you build those companies, and you make mistakes, and then you recover, and you learn from it, and you make progress, right? I'm pretty confident. I think Paytm will come out of it. The base is, the foundation of the company is strong. You know Vijay really well. He's a force of nature. He really believes in building the Indian startup ecosystem, and backing it. So I think I feel good about the company. It happens with a lot of companies across the globe. Look at how many, ebbs and flows Facebook has gone through in its life. And now it's like, look at what is happening to the company now, right? So you learn, you become better and you make progress. I think that's part of the game.
You know, speaking specifically of learnings though, and of course ebbs and flows happen with every business cycle and in the life cycle of every company, but specifically from a fintech point of view, because you know these are regulated businesses, these are companies that need to follow the regulations.
Absolutely.
Is there, you know, do you believe that there is a lesson in this story?
It's a huge lesson, I think. And I think the lesson is not only in fintech. I think any industry that is regulated, right? The companies that are doing real work and touching a lot of customers have to work hand in hand with the regulators and rest of the stakeholders in the ecosystem, right? To really make the best thing possible for the user. You have to work with everybody in the ecosystem to make sure that you are doing the right thing and you are protecting the user, and there's nothing that comes back and makes you, disrupt the user experience that you've built over the years, right? So the learning there is, if you are regulated or otherwise, you have to make sure every stakeholder of yours, whether it's the government or the regulator or the consumer,
Yeah.
you're always in tune with what their needs are and what they think is the best for the user.
We're going to take a break here on Young Turks and continue our conversation with Neeraj Arora from San Francisco right after this. Welcome back. You're watching Young Turks. We're in conversation with Neeraj Arora of General Catalyst. You talked about the spate of companies that have gone public, and I think from the time that Paytm and Zomato listed to the time that we're now seeing companies like Ola, etc., list, and soon Swiggy and others heading to the Lal Street as well, that there's also now been a realization that the kind of valuations that you perhaps commanded in the private markets are not going to be the same as they are in the public markets, and understanding that difference and realizing that you need to put enough on the table for investors. Do you believe that that has, not just ensured that we've seen IPOs do well, but it's also brought in a fiscal discipline into the ecosystem?
Absolutely. I think taking a company public is a huge learning, for every company that has gone public, right? Because the public investors are ruthless, right? They look at every part of your business in a very, objective way, and they value you. They're voting with their own money, right? So there's less of emotion. There's a lot more of objectivity in that investing, right? And that is a huge learning for any company that has built over the years and then taken it public, because then they make sure that every part of their business is performing and they are fiscally disciplined, and that the ROI is there, and everything that they do is to increase shareholder value, right? End of the day, that's the business we are in, right? You could, we have to delight the users, obviously, because they are the end customers, but we also have another user, which is your shareholder, and maximizing shareholder value, end of the day is what creates legendary companies over the years. And I think this learning of these startups going public is, I think, immensely useful for the whole ecosystem.
Is also useful for VCs, because one of the problems that we've seen play out, and I think many are now publicly acknowledging it, that too much money has actually been one of the big causes of the toxic culture and the toxic environment that we saw being created as well. So is there a learning that VCs are taking away from the way that public markets are treating these companies as well?
No, absolutely. I think, and all the VCs are asking the right questions now, right? You cannot just go burn money and grow and then nobody cares. I think everybody has thinking has evolved, and there's a public, market, examples of Zomatos of the world who have grown immensely and also are growing profitably. I think so. If a lot of these companies can do it, that means that can be done, right? It's no longer a dream that, okay, let's keep growing and then we'll figure about unit economics much later. That doesn't happen anymore. And I think that's a great development for India. I think the kind of company that we see now getting built and the discipline that we see in the founders is so heartwarming for me, I think, to look at.
And discipline in the investors as well?
I think so. I think it works hand in hand, right? If we are backing these companies and we look at how they think about building businesses in a very fiscally disciplined manner, that's great for us too, because I think for the end of the day, that also is capital preservation for us. Yeah.
Well, speaking about the environment, we've gone through a fairly prolonged period of a funding sort of pause, winter, whatever you would like to call it. We've now seen the Fed act delivering a 50 basis point cut. The expectation and the hope is that people who were sitting on a lot of dry powder may start to put that to use much more willingly. Is that the sense that you get as well?
I think, it's still early days, I would say. I think one cut is not going to really move the needle. A lot of things have to happen in the ecosystem to really make progress there. I think the IPO markets have not really opened up in a big way in the US, so I think that has to happen, right? So I agree with you that it's a good, welcome thing, but it has to be followed up with a lot of other things to really, open up the whole market. I think that will take some time.
Well, speaking of opening up markets, you're one of the investors, entrepreneurs who's decided to open up the US market to cricket. We saw that very successful World Cup here in the US. I mean, that was a big sort of bet as well, that you could bring cricket here to America.
I think cricket has always been a huge passion of mine. I used to play when I was growing up, and every kid, which kid doesn't play cricket growing up in India, right? Yeah. So when I moved to the US 15 years back, I always had this dream that cricket will one day become a real sport in the US. And we watch it a lot on TV here, and we once in a while go to real games internationally. But to dream about having cricket games in the US played by international countries with their best players and having a league of our own was a huge dream. And I think that's coming together. And I'm thrilled that we are able to build a sport from scratch and really introduce it to everybody in the US.
It's the Valley playing on the front foot, right? I mean, Satya, Shantanu, you, and a whole bunch of other folks.
I think that's something which we, collectively really believe in, right? If you really look at it, right? Cricket is part of our DNA, right? You cannot take it out of us, right? So if all of these folks that you talked about grew up watching cricket, playing cricket, and loving the game, we want to make sure that US gets a flavor of it too, right? So I think that's our little effort in making sure that we give it a kickstart and empower a lot of kids here to get introduced to the sport. And hopefully, I think one day it'll become like a real sport that everybody is interested in.
So what's the bet? 5 years down, what do you think?
Difficult to say. It's still early days. I think it's year 2 of the league. So all these things take time, I think, but we are thrilled with the start that it's got, right? So,
coming back to GC and what the road ahead looks like now, we're almost closing out 2024. What's the prognosis for 2025? Do you expect it to be a better year or, tepid? What's the view?
I think I'm a very optimistic guy. So I believe, the Indian startup ecosystem will keep thriving and growing, and we'll have a lot more companies that will build amazing products and be funded by a GC and other VCs. And a lot of the companies that have been built over the last decade will go public, and that will also spur the whole ecosystem, right? Going public is not only about providing liquidity to the the team and the management and the VCs. It's also about enabling hundreds of more entrepreneurs to go start their own companies. Right? So I see it as a catalyst more than anything else for the whole ecosystem, right? And GC and I want to be a big part of that, that story, that we are playing a real part in catalyzing the startup ecosystem and taking it to the next level. Right?
So what does that mean in terms of the kind of allocation that you intend to make for India? I would imagine that with Venture Highway and GC coming together, and with the Venture Highway expertise in India and more feet on the street, literally, what is it going to mean in terms of investments?
So we're definitely looking to expand our team. I think that's that's the only way we can actually scale investing in India. We have to have people in India who are working with startups day in and day out and helping them build the companies that they want to build, right? So it's important for us to scale the team in India. We will keep investing in all the areas that we just spoke about. And I think allocations are something which we are still working on. We think India will be a big part of investing for GC globally. And all the sectors that we talked about need real money, right? And if you look at GC and where we invest from seed all the way to pre-IPO, right? So if you're doing a lot of investing at different stages of company building, right from creating a company to seed funding it to pre-IPO, you need a real capital, and I think we are prepared. We are prepared with the capital.
So what is the current portfolio size in India between venture and GC combined?
So I think for the new set of investing that we're doing, starting with Zepto as our first announcement, I think we will have close to $500 million to $1 billion to invest in the next cycle of investing in India.
Well, Neeraj, we hope you continue to give wings to many more ideas and many more entrepreneurs, and of course build on your own entrepreneurial dream and story as well. It's always a pleasure to speak with you. Thanks so much for joining us, and once again, congratulations on the deal with GC.
Thank you, Shereen. Always a pleasure to talk to you.
Thanks very much. And with that, it is time for us to take a break here on this edition of Young Turks. We will be back, same time, same place. From all of us here, for now, goodbye and many thanks for watching.